Hello, thanks for joining us on Cable 14. I'm Kelly DiMartino. The Fort Collins community is currently in the midst of a conversation about how to address pressing, unfunded needs in 4 areas: police, fire, parks and recreation, and street maintenance. Today I'm pleased to have joining me 3 guests to talk more specifically about the needs that we have in the area of street maintenance. First, Deputy City Manager Diane Jones. Diane, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, Kelly.
Also, we have Erica Keaton, who is a Senior Project Manager in Engineering. Erica, welcome.
Thank you.
And Mark Jackson, who is the Council Budget and Communications Manager in Planning, Development, and Transportation. You've got quite the title.
The world's longest title.
Welcome,
Kelly.
Mark.
Thank you.
We're really looking at 4 different areas, and this is kind of the 4th in a series of shows we've done. Diane, I'm going to ask you to kick us off by talking about what's been going on in the area of street maintenance and why is this such an important community need?
Since 2005, we've really had a number of significant reductions in our resources for all of our transportation services, whether it be street maintenance. Our road and bridges need repair, and we're not able to do the amount of repair that's really needed. In our transit system, we have needs. So we have our pedestrian system as well. So we have a lot of needs that are not being met at the level I think that most people in the community want, and yet we want to focus on street maintenance today. We try to keep our streets at a level of excellent or good in terms of the state of repair, and we are falling behind. We have a gap in our current funding of about $6.5 million to really maintain the streets in the kind of condition that is rated as good. And so that's the really nutshell of our problem today.
The pavement management program is funded through 2 sources. It's funded through a dedicated quarter-cent sales tax that was voter approved, and then the balance of the program is through general fund. What the trends we've been seeing, obviously, the downturn in the economy that's happened worldwide is hitting us here at home. The sales tax is not generating the forecast revenue amounts that we had thought, simply because people aren't buying as much, aren't able to buy as much, and so it doesn't feed that fund. Similarly, the general fund, we've had to really scale back the general fund contribution to the program over the last couple of years. And in 2009, when funding really took such a precipitous decline, we actually had to reduce over $2 million of general fund contribution to this program.
And give me an idea of what that means. Is $2 million 10%? Is $2 million 50%?
Well, we started out in 2009 with about a $10 million budget, is that right? And I think we ended up the year with about a $7.1 million budget, 7.5, so 25% to 30% decline.
So that's significant.
That's more than significant.
Erica, what does that translate to in terms of actual projects or what we're able to deliver? Because it's one thing to talk about dollars, but really I think, you know, from a resident perspective, what I'm interested in is what's the impact on our system.
Sure, and I think the main thing people are going to see is deterioration on the streets they drive every day. Our arterials are more expensive to maintain, they're wider, they carry a lot more traffic, and those are the ones that you're probably going to see more deterioration on, more noticeable. You're going at a higher speed, a lot more people are going to be on those streets. You'll also see it in the residential areas. We've had to substantially cut back in residential areas. In fact, we took the bulk of the cut from 2009 in strictly residential neighborhoods. So what you see in front of your house is going to be affected as well. It's just like your house or your car. You want to maintain it while it's still in good condition, and it's not always noticeable right away. And once it is noticeable, it's not. It's almost too late at that point. So really, our target is to maintain good streets while they're in good condition. The longer you wait, the much more expensive it is to bring them back up.
We technically go out and test the pavement. So we have data about what the condition of the pavement is in. And it ranges from a condition of excellent, or we call it level of service A, to D, poor. Level of service D equals poor. We try to keep our streets in the excellent to good range. And we're able, by providing annual maintenance and repair and crack sealing and rehab. And if we're able to repair our streets while they're still in good shape, it costs us about $1 a unit to do that. If we let them deteriorate into a level of poor service, it's going to take us $4 to make that same kind of repair. So investing and keeping that investment up in terms of repair and ongoing repair, whether it's your car, your house, or your street, is going to save us millions of dollars in the long run, because if we let it deteriorate, it just costs us 4 times as much to bring that back up to the same condition.
What are kind of the current conditions of our streets now? I mean, you talked about, well, we tried to keep them at excellent to good. Are most of them in that category now, and we're looking at preventative?
We're still in the level of service B, which Diane mentioned, which is the good range. But we are pretty quickly angling downward. And part of that's due to the investment we haven't been able to make in maintaining that high level of service. Now, that doesn't mean every street in the city is in level of service B. That's an average condition over the entire network. So some of them are in D or F, some of them are in A.
And how do we go about prioritizing where we're going to invest and which streets get done first?
It's actually a very data-driven process. They do a physical inventory of the roads on a, is it 2 or 3 year cycle?
3.
3-year cycle. Well, they'll actually go out and using lasers and other really pretty sophisticated measuring devices, ascertain just what the level of roads are, and it goes into a giant computer. Is it a simulation program or is it a database?
It's a cost-benefit analysis.
And it will show where you can actually maximize your investment the most, and we'll show you which streets you should leverage your investments towards.
It doesn't have, you can put any kind of parameters on it you want. If you want to focus more on arterials, or you want to focus a certain dollar amount in one classification or another. But really the point is it's unbiased, and it's going to generate a variety of scenarios based on the budget you give it, based on the data collected, so you can make some educated decisions about where the right place is to spend the money.
Again, a lot of data that's driving our decisions. That's good. What we're hearing is that this data is showing that we need at least $6.5 million on top of what we have right now to be able to maintain the existing conditions of our streets. Again, when we look at that in comparison to the overall budget, that's a pretty large increase, it seems. So what would that do for the community, and why are we saying that that really is something that's a needed addition right now?
Well, I think we had an independent audit done in 2007, and they looked at, our program, where we were, the amount of investment that we were making in our street maintenance program. And if we wanted to maintain our streets in good condition at a level of service B, they estimated how much of an investment we needed to make as a community. So the investment we're making today, which as Mark said is about $7.1 million in our 2010 budget, that falls short by $6.5 million that they're recommending. So if we don't have those dollars, we'll make our dollars stretch as far as we can, but that means that we're not able to go in and repair and treat streets as many as we could if we had the $13 million level. So it just means that each year we fall a little further behind in reinvesting into our street maintenance system.
And also, I think an important thing to keep in mind as well is that the system isn't static, it's dynamic. We keep adding lane miles with capital projects or as development occurs, and there's additional operating and maintenance costs that are associated with those things. So it's not just a matter of keeping the current status quo, but also using the data and the tools that we have to ascertain how much it's going to cost in the future as well, as the system builds itself out.
We added streets also, in addition to what Mark referred to, through our annexation program. There were streets in the southwest part of town that are now under our responsibility to keep those well maintained.
As we talk about adding new lanes, adding new inventory really to our road system, I'm curious if there are kind of best practices out there in the industry of things that you can do to decrease the amount of maintenance that's required, because it seems like, I mean, obviously this is a significant investment. what are the best practices out there, and is Fort Collins able to incorporate those into what we do?
Are you talking about specific treatments?
Yeah, I
pavement
think,
treatments?
yeah, exactly. I mean, how do we minimize the
Right.
amount of street maintenance that we need to do?
Right.
And are we doing those things?
Right. And I think the first thing is really doing the right treatment at the right time. That's number one. But as far as the treatments go, we use a slurry seal treatment, which is mainly just a surface treatment that's sealing the surface, keeping out water, filling small cracks and voids. On a little bigger scale, we use a hot-in-place recycling, which is a large paving train. We recycle an inch of pavement in place and place an inch of new pavement over the top. That's been very successful for us on arterial roadways. It's a big piece of equipment, so you can't use it everywhere. But that's a fairly new technology that we're using, and then the last resort is the reconstruct, which we want to use those interim treatments earlier and avoid having to go to that rebuild stage.
Even with the rebuild stage, though, we're doing a lot of things from a sustainability standpoint, from a recycling standpoint. The city has a massive materials recycling program through the streets department where whether it's concrete, old rubble asphalt, even porcelain is ground up, and that gets used in road-based applications and such. So we're looking at every avenue we can to maximize what we've already got, what we can reuse and recycle back into the system.
We're also, when we're either building new streets or completely renovating streets like what we'll do at Harmony and College that's coming up this year, we're building a concrete intersection, and the concrete lasts longer. It's a little more of an investment to install it, but it lasts longer, and that also impacts our street maintenance program. So we're trying to look at ways from the time we build a street to also the practices on how we rehabilitate it and repair it that are cost effective.
We've also increased our recycled asphalt content in our new pavements. We've upped it to 20% of recycled material goes into new pavements as well. So that's something new this year that we've allowed.
Great. You mentioned all these different types of treatments. In terms of the expense for those treatments, I'm assuming that some of those are less expensive to actually do and some of them are more expensive. What's kind of the range and you know, how many of each of those types of projects do we typically do in a year?
That's a big question.
I like
That's a
big
multi-part
questions.
question.
Yes.
All right, let's start with the easy part. What are the costs for each of the different types of applications?
You know, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I think Diane had a great example earlier that, you know, what you spend in the early life cycle of a pavement, you're spending $1 or a unit, and if you have to go to the reconstruct treatment, you're spending 4 or 5 times as much. So certainly those rebuilds are more expensive. Incrementally going downward, the asphalt overlay is, you know, slightly less than the rebuild, and then the hot in place, and then we're talking slurry seal, chip seal, the least expensive being something like a crack seal.
I think also what we try to do each year, each season that we're doing our repair and maintenance, we bid the jobs. So that has an impact on the prices that we pay for the materials and for the actual treatments as well. And so as we always try to stretch that dollar to do as many streets as we can, and I think in a season, do we do roughly like 25 to 28 miles?
Yeah, I'd say more in the 20 to 25 mile range, yes.
Okay.
And is the goal then to say, well, we hope to never have to get to reconstruct projects? I mean, are you always trying to catch it early on? And is that a realistic goal?
I think someday it's a realistic goal. I don't think it is today because we still have streets in our network that were built 50 years ago, and there was a different standard, there was a different expectation at that time what the traffic load was going to be. So once you build the base, I think, you know, sometime in the future and all the streets are built to a set standard, really, I think that's the target, is to never have to rebuild something. You just rehabilitate the surface.
You know, street maintenance and transportation seems to be a topic that you hear communities across the country wrestle with, how to fund their transportation infrastructure. I'm curious if you know how Fort Collins' system compares to other places, and historically, have we done a good job of investing in our system and now we need to continue that, or have we always kind of been behind the curve? Do you know where we fit?
Well, I think Fort Collins has a long history of voters appreciating and supporting the street maintenance program. You can go back, I've been here 11 years and I've seen them, was it 2 or 3 different times approve and continue supporting those sorts of things. So I think in that aspect, there's a very strong record. Voters have been good about approving certain capital projects. The Harmony and College intersection project is just one that was approved as part of the most recent Building on Basics. So I think there's a strong track record there. What we're going through isn't unique. It's happening around the country. Basically, the funding sources traditionally that have funded transportation, if you call it the gas tax for less of not a very good acronym, people aren't buying as many cars. So the traditional means that we have funded our transportation infrastructure in the country are literally going away. Vehicles are more fuel efficient, so there's just less and less revenue. And so even at the federal level, people are really looking about how we want to change our funding structures. A lot of communities will have ongoing both capital and operating and maintenance as part of their general fund. We do it a little bit differently through the transportation fund sources that we've talked about, the quarter-cent sales tax. I don't think there's necessarily a right way or wrong way or best way. It's just what works for that community.
And I think communities, you know, they do use a combination, as Mark alluded to. There's sales and use taxes that go to support transportation and including street maintenance. Property taxes, some communities rely more on property taxes, but there's usually a mix of taxes and fees and then sources from outside, whether that's through the state gas tax, motor vehicle registration, and so on. So everybody tries to put together the combination that works for their community. I think that as Mark also pointed out in Fort Collins, people understand that street maintenance is a real integral part of our service. Our transportation system is so important for so many purposes, and it is really a lifeline throughout our community. And voters have, I think, felt like that we've been good stewards of that money and have reinvested it into that for that purpose. It's that reinvestment is working, but it's not enough to really maintain the level and the kind of condition that people expect and really rely on, whether it's for business, for school purposes, for leisure, and for commerce. It's really, as I said, serves so many purposes. But communities have really have their own choice about how to fund that, and how they do it is really in a variety of ways.
Okay, definitely one of those basic infrastructure things.
Absolutely.
As we talk street maintenance, the word maintenance can mean different things to different people, and I think that we've been pretty clear, but I just want to make sure people understand we're not talking about, you know, snow plowing here, right? I mean, this is really about the condition of the pavement itself.
And I think maybe the distinction is minor maintenance versus major maintenance. We would call minor snow plowing, sweeping, potholing, maybe crack sealing fits in that category. Major maintenance is asphalt overlay, reconstruction, concrete slab repair, that kind of thing.
The systematic management of the road system.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Efficient use of resources, Diane, you mentioned, and that's really important to people, that they understand we're efficiently using the resources that we do have. Is this work that we do in-house? Do we contract out? How do we make sure that we're using the resources that we do have to the greatest extent possible?
We use a contractor for a number of different operations, for concrete repairs and asphalt overlay mostly, and also the slurry and the chip seal type treatments. But we also use our in-house streets crews for a large bulk of the milling, which is removing the pavement and placing that first layer of asphalt. And that typically maintains that crew or keeps that crew going all summer long. And that's probably in the $2 million range that's done by in-house forces.
I think we also, because we use both the private sector contractors and we use our in-house folks, we look at those competitive prices and we really try to be very competitive, whether it's inside or using external contractors.
That's a really good point, because the milling is a fairly expensive operation, and we have a lot of flexibility with having it ourselves. We can dominate where it goes and what it does every single day, and we can dedicate it to strictly our project, whereas a private contractor maybe wouldn't have the flexibility to be able to do that.
It also affords us the flexibility that that after the paving season is over, those in-house resources are then used for our snow removal efforts, street sweeping efforts, things like that. So it's an efficient use of the resources throughout the calendar year.
So people are cross-trained to do different things.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, good. So what perception is an important thing, I think, and one of the questions that I've heard occasionally is, hey, it looks like we're out, resurfacing streets that don't need to be resurfaced. How would you respond to that? Now I get to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Well, I think that goes back to what we were talking a little bit earlier, is that you have to maintain a street while it's in good condition. And to the average person, that may not look like, a giant pothole. It doesn't look like that. It's minor surface failures, minor cracks, maybe some minor rutting or wearing of that surface, and really that's the time to do it, because like I said before, once the pothole's there, the damage has been done, and a much more substantial repair has to be made.
And I think that's why we have the inventory that is collected, the information that's collected, as Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, that we have that information so we know what the condition of that pavement is like, whether to my eye it looks like it's in good shape or not. So we really do depend on the data, and that drives where we do our treatments and where we do our repairs.
We've been very fortunate here in Fort Collins in the past that we don't have to follow this worst first scenario, which is deal with the immediate hazard or the immediate problem street. We have the flexibility and the technology to be a little more proactive instead of strictly reacting to this, where is the worst problem. So certainly that's been the secret to our success, I think, of being where we are today and having such a high condition number today.
That I think ties back to what you were saying about being responsible stewards of the dollars that we have. It's trying to get at it before we have to spend $4 per unit instead of $1 per unit.
If you saw us out there reconstructing every street that we needed to, we probably haven't been doing our job. I think exactly what Erica is saying is the fact that we have the ability to be proactive and strategic about this that's evidence of a good program, a good solid program.
And is it safe to say that you're concerned that that could change if we don't have additional resources in the program?
I think it's very safe to say that. It's like anything. I mean, Erica used the example about maintaining your home. The longer you let it go, not only is it going to be a harder, more difficult job, it's going to increase in cost significantly. And that's the scary part, is if the system starts sliding, the costs really, it's not linear. It becomes pretty exponential in terms of how much larger it gets.
So if we have only a few roads that we can rebuild, say that's all the money we have, you haven't covered very much of the network as a whole. You've only covered a couple miles, whereas if we're covering 20 or 25 miles, the network as a whole is going to have a higher average condition. Obviously, the more expensive ones use more budget. You can't cover as much distance.
Because as Erica said, we can do 20 to 25 miles a year, and we now have 500 plus road miles or lane miles in our system. So you kind of start calculating that, and you see how many years it takes us to come around, and that has the effect on how well our system gets maintained or not.
And do those miles happen together in clumps, or are you all in different parts of town in any given season?
We're all over different parts of town at any given time. We do try to aggregate those things together in a neighborhood, for example, and it wouldn't make sense for us to pave one block here and then skip a block and then slurry seal the next block. And that's the human element of taking all that data and putting it together into something that makes sense. So we do try to target, a neighborhood at a time, or several, pieces of an arterial at a time, so that, we're doing something that's efficient for the contractor or for our streets crews, and we're utilizing the money the best way we possibly can.
All right. Well, it seems like a fairly straightforward area to me, actually, that either invest now or invest more later is kind of the key takeaway. Again, just for our viewers who may be tuning in, historically, this funding source has been declining, and again, what do we need long-term versus what do we have now?
Well, I think that, as Mark mentioned, a large portion of the monies that we use for street maintenance come from voter-approved quarter cent tax measure. And so we've had that in place for several years. That has diminished as our sales and use tax revenues have gone down. So that's diminished in relationship to the strength of our economy. We also, the street maintenance is supported by general fund dollars. Those have diminished not only because our revenues have diminished because of the economic conditions, but we have so many needs across the city that those have just diminished proportionately. So the revenues overall have diminished from what we had perhaps 3 or 4 years ago. And then the needs, as outlined in our audit of our street system and the expansion of our street system, those are growing. So you have diminishing resources, growing needs, and so the gap widens.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that excellent summary, Diane. I think that really kind of helps outline the problem for people. As we close our conversation today, Mark, any closing comments that you would like our viewers to take away?
Well, thanks, Sally.
Touche.
The only thing I think I would add is that it goes so far beyond transportation. It sounds maybe a bit cliche, but the importance of a well-maintained transportation infrastructure affects everything. It affects the quality of life. It affects the perception of the community. It affects the economy in a huge way. It's not just about moving people. It's about moving goods and services and information as well. So this is really an investment in a lot of things well beyond just how smooth the road feels when you're driving on it.
All right. Mark, thank you for joining us. Erica, any final thoughts from you?
I think just one thing that's really important to mention is the timing of this discussion, because we've been saying we need more money over and over again, but today is really the day. I mean, the time has come where we need to step up and do something about it, because just like we've been saying, the longer you wait, it's only going to get that much worse.
All right. Erica, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
And Diane?
The only thing to add, I think, to what Mark and Erica have said is that, the street system is so integral to our community, and we've invested wisely. I mean, it's been a partnership with the taxpayers and then with the city to be good stewards of that money and maintain a good system. We have a good system, and we just are worried that we're going to lose that investment and not be able to continue to maintain the system that people really rely on. And so we want to, and we know how important it is. And so it's just, trying to say, let's help one another out and help the community.
All right. Diane, thank you for joining us. To learn more about the choices the community is facing and to engage in the dialogue, please go to fcgov.com/resourcingourfuture. Thanks for joining us.